want to say good morning to everyone. Welcome to the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. This is the committee's first of several hearings on audit reports. I want to encourage all members to come to room 126 as soon as possible so that we can establish a quorum. Sergeant, if you can please begin to call our members and ask them to please join us. Because of the lack of a quorum, we want to act as a subcommittee at this point in time. I realize everyone's time is very valuable, and we want to move expeditiously to try to address some of the items that before this committee and this body to consider. With that being said, I want to introduce, and she's already here, our state auditor, Ms. Elaine Howell. Thank you very much, and good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning. We will open up with you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. For the record, my name is Elaine Howell. I'm the California State Auditor, and what I'd like to do initially at each JLAC hearing is I give a status report on our current available resources and then the audits that you intend to consider at your hearing today. Excuse me, I'm coming down with a cold that's going around with everybody. We currently have 12 JLAC audits underway. These are audits that were approved last August at the last JLAC hearing. We have 6 statutory audits currently underway. The biggest is the annual financial audit that we conduct for the state's financial statements. We issue an opinion on that. Typically that's done by the end of March. In addition to that, we audit all of the federal programs that California administers. We are the auditor on behalf of the federal government. That audit coincides with the audit of the state's financial statements, and it's referred to as a single audit. So that'll be done at the end of March. What that means is a lot of resources will be freeing up in my office, and as reflected in the status report, we have enough resources right now to commence 11 audits. I understand the committee has 3 for consideration today. We certainly can. And there's one audit that, as I talk about that audit when the member presents, we can assign a couple of teams to that particular project because it's a big audit and it's requiring us to go to multiple sites. So my intention there is to assign 2 teams to that audit. But again, we certainly have available resources to start any of the audits that are approved today. In addition to that, in lieu of additional audits from the committee, we will be doing some high-risk work and some follow-up work. We currently have some of that on our work in progress right now. And we will do that and commence additional follow-ups and additional high-risk work. There is a tremendous amount of flexibility with that work, so I do want the members to be aware that at the next JLAC hearing we will make sure that we have resources available for audits that are up for consideration at the next hearing. With that said, we have thus far this year issued 8 JLAC audits. In January and February we've issued some high-risk work, and the next few months we'll be issuing another 7 to 11 audits, depending on whether or not they stay on the time frame. Certainly the ones for March are going to go out in March, April. We're confident on those, and we have several, 4 or 5 up for release in May. Those are certainly subject to change, but we will try to stay on course with those and get those released in May. And the reason I'm explaining that is that, again, will be additional staff available for assignment to any future audits that the committee considers at subsequent hearings. But the agenda today, my understanding, we have 3 audits up for consideration, and we absolutely have the resources to be able to commence each and every one of those audits immediately.
Yes.
Can I just ask, what does high risk mean?
The high risk program, we have statutory authority to do assessments of an issue area such as information technology in California, governance of information technology, or execution of projects, emergency preparedness. So these are issue areas that we have identified. We have statutory authority to do that by talking to legislative staff, legislative members, audit work that we've done, work that LAO has done. And what that program is we establish those issue areas such as IT, and then that gives us, to the extent we have resources available, the opportunity to go in and self-initiate audits. So statutory work comes first, audit committee, legislative work certainly next, approved through this committee, and then to the extent I have resources available, I have the ability to go out and self-initiate audits in areas that we've already identified as high risk, where there's weaknesses in efficiency, effectiveness of carrying out particular programs.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Can you please just elaborate briefly on some of the high-risk cases that you have before us?
Sure. The status report, or the work in progress, identifies we currently have a high-risk information technology project that will be issuing on March 19th. That high-risk assessment, that's actually an audit where we went in and looked at the state of California and our oversight, primarily Caltech, and their oversight of IT projects and what weaknesses we've seen. We all know about the Breeze project that we recently audited and issued a report on that. We know about some past history and struggles with some other IT projects. So we felt this was an area that we really needed to take a look at and try to bring together sample projects and really determine, are there common themes among all of those projects that we can learn from and hopefully strengthen our oversight of information technology projects. Some of the other high-risk projects or assessments on the work in progress are really just that, an assessment. We determined that the Department of Public Health administering certain programs in California have really struggled. And what we do with our follow-up process is we look at recommendations that we've made and what the status is of those recommendations. And if the agency is slow to implement, and we think, obviously, we've made the recommendation, we think it's an important recommendation, and an important thing for public health to do. If we're not seeing progress, then we're going to continue to assess that agency and say this is an agency that is at high risk for inefficiency and ineffectiveness because they are not implementing all of the recommendations that we've made. So the healthcare services high risk assessment on here. Public health was issued yesterday. Healthcare services will be issued tomorrow. Again, that's more of an assessment. It's not really an audit. Succession planning is an issue area we identified a few years ago where the state of California, a lot of our state employees are reaching retirement age, and there's going to be a massive amount of institutional knowledge that the state of California is going to lose. So we identified this as an issue area a few years ago. What are state agencies doing to ensure that the employees who are mid-managers are ready to take on those executive roles and be able to essentially carry the torch, in my terms, to make sure that our programs continue to operate efficiently. So succession planning will be more of an audit. The last one is Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. We looked at that, again, from a variety of perspectives. Population certainly had been an issue for years with the state of California, prison overcrowding. Looking at the health care, the receivership, and then we looked at realignment and what some of the impacts and the effects of realignment have been. So that report, again, will be more of an assessment of a variety of issues that we have identified at the Department of Corrections over the years, and that will be released in April. So that's kind of an overview of the high-risk projects, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for our state auditor by the committee members? Hearing none. Members, we have 3 audits remaining on the agenda today. Just want to make mention that audit number 2015-105 related to Cover California and the item number 2015-108 related to the City of Irvine was pulled by the requesting members. We will follow the normal format with the members presenting their audit request by sign-in order. Members of the committee will present their requests last. After each member does their presentation, the state auditor will present her analysis, followed by the affected agency. Then we'll have questions and answers from the committee members, and then we will give also the public an opportunity to have their comments, and we're going to ask the public to limit their comments to 2 minutes. So with that, we want to invite Mr. Dodd to please come.
Good morning.
And you can present your request at this this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. I'm requesting that the state auditor examine property tax revenue losses incurred by local governments as a result of expanding UC and CSU campuses. This request also asks that the state auditor to provide information on any related revenue increases to local fire departments providing critical safety services for a sampling of campuses in their surrounding communities. For decades, fire agencies have been charged with providing fire protection and emergency medical response services to our communities, including those communities that host UC and CSU campuses and the campuses themselves. These services are predominantly supported by property tax revenues allocated to local governments. Current law exempts UC and CSU systems from paying property tax on the buildings acquired or constructed for campus use. When a campus acquires a private tax-paying property, it is taken off the tax rolls permanently, and the community surrounding the campus receives less property tax revenue as a result. That revenue that is no longer available for fire protection and emergency response services. The good news, though, is our state's universities are expanding to accommodate the ever-increasing population of students seeking a college degree from California's preeminent institutions of higher learning. Conversely, these expansions often in the area of student housing pose a strain on the budgets of the local agencies that must absorb the increased service demand and likewise suffer the resulting property tax loss. As students migrate off campus for their housing needs, these tax-paying properties that may have otherwise been a source of property tax or other facilities that generate sales tax are removed from the tax rolls. This audit will shed light on whether communities hosting UC or CSU campus experience the fiscal pressures we describe or whether they receive a commensurate share of revenue to offset the true costs that they incur for rendering campus-related services. The health and safety of the students, faculty and staff, and visitors at California universities, as well as the residents in the surrounding communities, remain of paramount importance. It's imperative that we as policymakers understand the impacts of decisions regarding campus growth and planning. This audit will serve to inform this discussion going forward. For these reasons, I respectfully request that you approve this audit request. Here today is Christy Boma with the California Professional Firefighters. She is available to answer any technical questions that you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members.
Thank you very much, Adot. Do we have any would the witnesses like to?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Christy Baumer representing the California Professional Firefighters. I just want to thank Assemblymember Dodd and some of his colleagues on this committee for signing on to this audit request, and we're anxious to see the results.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Ralph Hine for the California Fire Chiefs Association. We would echo Ms. Baumann's comments and thank the authors. Property tax is, in some cases, the major source of revenue for fire protection agencies, and we would look forward to the information developed by the audit. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair and members, Caitlin Vega for the California Labor Federation, also here in support.
Fantastic. Welcome. Ms. Howell, would you like to have a few comments and give your report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Assemblymember Dodd indicated, this would be an audit of both some sample of CSU campuses and University of California campuses. So we would, first of all, go to headquarters at each entity and look for policies, procedures, practices. And then, as the member indicated, there is a sample of campuses. They have suggested certain campuses that they would like us to visit. I can certainly lay that out. It's in your binder attached to the letter prepared by the members requesting the audit. But looking at policies and practices for engaging with the local community and determining whether or not they're going to acquire property and what that process will look like, whether it's going to be construction, expansion, acquisition, et cetera. Also, the members are asking us to go back 5 fiscal years and look for budgetary allocations that both the CSU system and the UC system have made for the selection of campuses relative to protection and emergency services provision for campuses at each of those 7 locations. Then they would like us to go back to January of 2010 and determine, of the properties that have been acquired, what the current assessed value of those properties is. Again, this is tied to those 7 campuses. And then also try to determine the loss of, or estimate the loss of property revenue associated with the acquisition of that property. One objective, they would like us to survey essentially all the campuses in California, both the CSU and UC system, and this is to determine whether or not those respective campuses have an agreement, perhaps a contract with a local fire department. It's my understanding from some of the background material that I read last night to prepare for the hearing, UC Santa Cruz actually does have an agreement with the City of Santa Cruz with the fire and emergency medical services. So those are the types of agreements that the members are asking us to look for. We would be able to do that certainly at the 7 campuses we visit, and then we would intend to survey the remaining campuses to determine if there are any agreements for any of those campuses as well. And then the final objective is determining, back to the 7 campuses, the 4 CSU and the 3 UC, have any of those localities tried to put a measure on the ballot to try to increase a local tax measure to try and increase taxes to make up for perhaps the loss of property. So the majority of the objectives tie to 7 campuses. One objective is asking us to look at all of the campuses in California. The budget on this audit is relatively large. It's over 4,000 hours. The reason for that is 7 locations. And this is the audit, as I said in my opening comments, we would assign 2 teams to. I would envision one team doing the UC work, another team doing the CSU work. That would allow us to get the job done more quickly, chronologically. So in my view, even though this is a 4,400-hour audit, I think we could get it done in about 7 months. Using 2 different teams, and then those teams certainly collaborating together to draft the audit report. So with that, members, I hopefully will be able to answer any questions you may have.
I just have one question. Is this a normal format that you would use, using 2 teams, or is it because of the scope and the magnitude of your research or your audit?
It's due to the scope, Mr. Chair, the fact that it's a large audit and that we have multiple locations to visit. Now, if we were doing an audit, for example, we're conducting an audit right now of the State Bar, and that would be one where we have a team working in San Francisco or a team working in Los Angeles. This audit is a very broad scope, and it allows us to split and use 2 teams because of the fact that we're going to the CSU system and doing some work there in the UC. So this is not necessarily a standard protocol.
Thank you very much. Want to invite the affected agency to please come up to the table and provide your presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Karen Zamaripa. I'm the Assistant Vice Chancellor for the California State University. With me today is also our Assistant Vice Chancellor of Capital Planning, Business and Capital Planning for the CSU system, Vice San Juan. So I think where we'd like to just start, we obviously believe that the committee should move forward as they see fit, of course. Just want to provide you some insight from our perspective so that you can put that in your thought process. So let me start with the fact that it's not just CSU and the University of California that are exempt from paying property taxes. It's all state agencies and local government. So in fact, every time a state agency or a local government makes an acquisition, they are also affecting local property tax revenue. So the fact that I just wanted to set the record straight because it seemed to suggest that only CSU and UC benefit from the Constitution, which is what outlines that exemption for public agencies, including our campuses. I have been with the CSU for 24 years, and I would just say that in my period in this position, I have seen all kinds of activity by local government, elected officials, and others clamoring to make sure that we have a CSU in their community, because we bring incredible economic benefit to the community that we are in. It's not just the benefit at your direction under the master plan to serve access to a quality education for students, but we also bring a lot of businesses around those communities and a lot of economic activity. In fact, we estimate that our economic activity for the state of California and local governments in 2008-9 was about $17 billion as a result of not only our actual function of our campuses, all 23 of them, and our off-campus centers, but also the benefits as it relates to the graduates and our alumni that are working in the world today and contributing as taxpayers. So I think it's a fair statement to say that we are a return on the investment that probably, in many cases, far exceeds the concern specifically that's been raised by the firefighters here. And I think ultimately what happens is that if this audit proceeds, then I think the question that will be before us is whether we're going to change the Constitution as it relates to exemption of property tax, and then the question will be, are we going to backfill those losses for the CSU? And is that going to be state general fund? Is that going to be cuts in services and access? Or is there going to be other remedies that nobody wants to talk about, nor do we want to pursue? In the case of CSU, we're only able to document that we've had 11 private properties and 1 public property that we acquired, if you will, in the last year or so. Since 2010. 2010, excuse me. And so our estimated loss in revenue there in property taxes is peanuts, frankly, as compared to the economic contribution of the campuses in the region. The other thing that I just want to make sure that the committee is aware of is that this is a matter before the California Supreme Court. There are 2 pending cases, one of which originated from East Bay, CSU East Bay, and another that is looking at this exact question as it relates to the constitutionality regarding our obligation in paying property taxes and how we fund services. The Constitution also provides that local government provide fire protection services, and so I think that's the question that the Supreme Court is actually grappling with. So I just want to make sure the committee is aware of that, given that that's a pending case, and whether the audit might be premature as you wait for that Supreme Court decision. So with that, I'm going to finish. Is there anything else you'd add, Vi? And I'm happy to answer questions, as is Vi.
Sure. Let me ask you a question. I heard your comments and just want to ask this question because you painted a picture as if you were opposed to the audit being done.
That's correct. So
I thought earlier you said that you welcome the audit.
No, I said that it's up to you to decide whether you would like to do the audit. So here's the other thing that I would say to you. The estimate from the auditor is $500,000 for her costs. That does not include the costs associated with the 7 campuses that are going to be participating in this audit. So those are real costs to the institution as well that are going to be redirected from other functions in order to participate. And we'll do that with the committee's direction. But I'm not here to support this audit because I think it's premature given the Supreme Court pending case and the current Constitution that already provides that property taxes are not paid by state agencies, including us and the University of California.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman and members, my name is Steve Juarez. I represent the University of California here in Sacramento. With me today I have Deborah Wiley, who's with our capital programs department, and she can answer any specific questions. But I just want to give a little more color for the members relative to how UC deals with fire services. First of all, it's important to recognize that amongst our 10 campuses, we have a variety and a diversity of relationships that are primarily driven by both the location of the particular campus, but also whether it's in an urban, suburban, or rural setting, because that will determine the type of services that we actually choose to engage in or to obtain from others. For instance, here in the local area, UC Davis actually has their own fire department, and as part of that, the fire chief for the campus is also the fire chief for the city of Davis. At UC Santa Cruz, we have essentially a merger of both the city fire department as well as with the campus fire department. So they actually work together, although they have separate sets of employees. They work hand in hand. And then we have campuses that actually have fire stations on the campuses where they're actually providing a place by which the local entity can provide these types of services. And that's just a part of it. We also contract for fire services. So in many instances, it's hard to say that one type of response will fit all. We try to adjust for all situations driven by the circumstances. I would also say that as far as the process, we engage in a very active and substantial process when we do our long-range development plans to identify those places where we may need to mitigate the impact of the projects that we're putting forward. As part of that, we try to make sure that, in fact, that all the attendant issues that have been raised are attended to in terms of environmental impact. It may not always get to economic impact, but we try to be good actors with the local governments, and we work very closely with anybody that's affected by any development that's occurring at the campus, and we try to do that in good faith. Finally, I want to make sure that you're aware that most of the development that takes place at the University of California these days is not outside our footprint. It's actually within the campus footprint that exists today. So what that means is that we're not taking property that's currently taxable and putting it into the tax-exempt category. So just to be clear, most of the development that's taking place at the University of California is within that footprint, and so we're not necessarily trading off against that. I would just conclude with one final point, and it reiterates a point that was made by Ms. Zamaripa, and that is that I would hope that the auditor, if this audit does move forward, that they'll actually look at the positive impact that's brought about by development at UC campuses. In many cases, we have business and other services that are actually created because of the development that we're actually conducting. And so if we're going to do the audit, it has to be looked at in a holistic way to take into account those positive benefits that go to revenue. So things like property tax, sales tax, and other fees and revenues are actually driven by the development that could be used for fire services. So in any event, we're here to answer any further questions the committee may have, and Deborah's here to answer any specific technical questions.
Thank you very much. Members?
Mr. Chairman? Just a quick question. Thank you for our Cal State representatives. Karen, thank you for coming today and offering a perspective. Can you address the timing of the Supreme Court's, where that is in the process?
Sure. Thank you, Member Baker. Vice San Juan with Cal State University. The San Diego case has been briefed by both sides, and we're waiting for the Supreme Court now. We were thinking it was going to be last fall, then January, so we are waiting.
Has there been oral argument on the East Bay or briefing on the East Bay related case?
No, they have elected to hold off on making a decision on when to hear East Bay pending the San Diego case. Thank you.
At this time, we recognize the quorum. Madam Chair, if you can, Secretary, please call the roll.
Assemblymember Gibson?
Present.
Gibson, present. Ashajian? Baker?
Present.
Baker, present. Campos? Jones? Here. Jones here. Rendon? Here. Rendon here. Nazarian? Present. Nazarian, present. Senator Roth? Here. Senator Roth here. Bell. Bell here. Canella. Fuller. Present. Fuller present. Galgiani. Lara. Here. Lara here. Leyva. Here. Leyva here.
A quorum has been established. Members will continue and commence with questions. Anyone have questions for these witnesses? Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to support the audit today. I do share some of CSU's and UC's concerns about the audit being kind of one-sided and only presenting one half of the picture. Coming from a city council, I know that that's when a city council is voting to allow any kind of nonprofit organization to remove a piece of property from the tax rolls. You know, that's one of the things they balance in their mind is the loss of property tax equal or less than the benefit that the community is going to get from allowing that organization to have that particular piece of property. So with that said, I would encourage the UC and CSU systems, which I'm sure they're both very well qualified and have economic departments that can do studies of their own. In parallel to this study, come back to us with that information according to your perspective of what value do you add to the communities in the areas where you are removing these properties from the tax rolls. And I won't be surprised to learn that the benefit does far outweigh the loss in revenue from the property taxes. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.